decided about 2.5 years ago to go down the route of upgrading our Windows 7 network to Windows 10. I'm actually only 21. That's why I've aged so rapidly in the last couple of years. No, I wish I was only 21. So I'm one of the ambassadors for RICS ANME, Association of Network Managers in Education, and I do a lot of presenting on deploying Windows 10 in an education environment. I'm not saying I'm the expert. All I'm doing is giving my experience of what we've been through over the last 2.5 years. Over the last 6 months, things have changed dramatically in the way that the success to the whole deployment of Windows 10 comes down on how you deploy it and how you create your profiles. If you get that right, the rest of your life is easy and you'll just have an easy deployment. If you don't, if you start on the wrong route, you will be on a road to a nightmare of all your staff saying, I've just logged in, the start menu, everything works great. The next day, I've got no start menu, I can't do anything. The next day, oh, the start menu's back, but all the icons keep dropping off, and it's just horrendous. And it goes on and on and on and on. Hopefully, the tips and tricks I'll give you today, they're all available on the presentation, and we will make them available, the links I've got, especially the TechNet links, and how to create profiles. Those are the key things. I can actually email those to you as well if you want them. So a couple of things I'm going to cover, a session overview. First of all, which version? Why on earth are you deciding to basically upgrade and put a new version of Windows 10 in nearly every 6 months? The profiles have gone from, I think, V3, 4, 5, 6 now. If you're using mandatory profiles, all sorts of things. Building the base image options. Apps or no apps? That's the big question. What do you use? WDS, MDT, SCCM? Anybody know what Windows ICD is?
Image configuration designer or something?
Quick, give them the prize. One of the first people who've actually known what that is yet. Windows Image and Configuration Designer. Basically is a bit like SCCM, you build your packages and deploy that after you deployed your Windows 10. Your Sysprep options, Windows Automated Installation Kit, capture and deployment. This is the big one, your profile options. Yeah, your local mandatory. Roaming, my recommendation now is forget roaming. Yeah, Microsoft are basically just going to forget it. Anybody know what UEV is in Windows 10 default profile? Okay, so Windows UEV is basically a set of configuration files that you store in the personal user's home folder, and that's part of the profile creation. It looks to that folder, sees the configuration, drags it back. It's the way Microsoft wants to go, and I think when we're going to use URAD and all that sort of situation, we're probably going to have to use it. At the moment, I'm not going to cover that because I don't think it's the best way to go. Here's the big one, start menu, desktop folder redirection. Do we redirect app data or don't we redirect app data? Group policy, and then the common issues at the end of it. Okay, because I like to be chatty, and you're all my friends now, I've met you this morning, I'd like it to be an interactive discussion. So I'd like to basically interact with you guys, you tell me your experiences, what you want to do and everything, and then I'll try and help you out as much as I can. Okay, so which version? Windows 10, obviously. First of all, I would recommend 64-bit. As much as possible, use 64-bit. Microsoft recommends as low as 2 gig. I put a minimum of 4 gig in. I try and put 8 gig in everything now. And basically it's recommended to have SSD hard drives in. Or we use now the SHSD, the hybrid SSDs, which are a lot cheaper and you can get them in bigger sizes as well. Version options. This is a bit confusing really. Windows 10 Education or LTSB. LTSB, Long-Term Servicing Branch. Really is more for tills, service things, service facilities and stuff like that. The big thing with LTSB though, it doesn't have any apps on it. So if you build a Windows 2016 RDS farm, the Windows 10 experience on that is actually Windows 10 LTSB. There's no apps on it. Very quick. The only problem is it doesn't get updated because it's a long-term servicing branch. So it might not be updated for 12 months, for 2 years. But it doesn't have the apps in and it makes it very good. It's basically Windows 7 with just a bit of a Windows 10 start menu. So there is an option you have to consider. A lot of people say, do we do Windows 10 Education or Windows 10 Enterprise? Windows 10 Education. it is exactly the same as Enterprise. If you put them side by side on the comparison chart, you'll see that what you get with Education is exactly the same as Enterprise.
Education allow you to use app locker and group policy?
Yes. Yeah. So on your EES agreement, you will see Windows 10 Education. And no offence, the default's in the name, isn't it? Windows 10 Education we should be using in schools. Now, what they did is in 1607, and I'll come down to the versions in a minute, they removed Cortana because obviously they thought in education was causing issues, they didn't need it. And then delightful in 1703, they stuck it back in. But there's group policies to disable that. The cumulative updates for 1507 have now stopped. So they're saying that they won't update 1507 because they say you should update. So the version history, 1507 was the initial release, 1511 the November update, 1607 is the anniversary, 1703 is the creators update, that's currently what is out at the moment, and then in October this year, 1709 will be the full creators update. So when we first started off, we had, I think it was V5 or V4 for your mandatory profile. We're now on V6. So it's quite important, if that update goes on, you need to understand, you might have to change your profile. So Windows 10 LTSB, again, normally it'll be a 2-year update cycle for a long-term services branch to actually update to the next upgrade. So again, you have to be very careful with that. But the key thing is, it doesn't have any built-in apps, and it will increase the speed of use and your login speed, so that's something up to you. Personally, I just stick with Windows 10 Education. Okay, so this is the key thing. So has anybody actually tried at the moment building your Windows 10 image? What do we use? Does anybody use WDS at the moment? MDT?
With MDT, yeah.
MDT, SCCM, anybody? Just MDT. Obviously nobody's using Windows ICD, I can't blame you. Okay, so most people I think are going to use a combination of MDT and WDS. Okay, so the biggest problem with Windows 10, the base ISO that you download from the EES site comes loaded with apps. It comes loaded with Candy Crush, Xbox Live, all the stuff we want to let our kids loose on in our network. You know, that's exactly what we want them to have. So the biggest problem is, when you first log on and it creates that default profile, it starts loading and updating all the apps. And as soon as it does that, your first login speed is normally about 5 to 6 minutes. Imagine using local profiles, every time you log in, it's going to be 5 to 6 minutes. You would obviously then be working in Sainsbury's on the next Monday because you just get hung. So the key to everything I find is how you build your base image. And the way I do it now is basically, do we keep the apps in or do we take the apps out? My belief is to take the apps out. A lot of people will actually have a script running that once you built it, you log in, it removes the apps for the users. Problem with that is, it's another script to run. So do we actually need Xbox Live, Xbox this, and all these other different apps? No, we don't. So what I do is, I actually download the ISO, take the install.wim out, I'll give you a PowerShell script, and when you run the PowerShell script, it'll actually remove or give you the options of removing the apps from the WIM file. And then I leave photos and calculator in. Once you do that, you then put the WIM back into the folder, use a piece of software called ImageBurn, completely free, and then you recompile the ISO and burn it into a CD. So you've now got a Windows 10 1703 image to build, but with no apps on, or apart from the couple of apps that you want.
Can I ask you a question? If Windows, we're still using Windows 7, if there's a Windows 10 Education Editions, why don't they give you the option first to deselect which ones you don't want?
If they did that, I wouldn't be standing here now. I wish they would. I really wish they would. But if you take the LTSB option, that you don't need that because there's no apps in it. But they decided on the Windows 10 that even for education, they'll leave all those apps in, and it's just mad. I mean, why do we want Candy Crush? You know what I mean? Twitter feeds and all this stuff into it, because it just populates and goes straight to the internet. So once you get your ISO at the end of it, and you've got it on the CD or however you want to deploy your ISO, whatever, you've now got something without any apps. When it starts up, when you rolled it out, and you first log on, that's the massive difference. It's a huge, huge difference. And I'll give you the scripts, how to do all this and everything. Now, there's a quick note. there's two sections of apps in Windows 10. There's the built-in ones that you remove through PowerShell, and also there's the Microsoft built-in ones, which stuff like Candy Crush, which doesn't come out through a PowerShell script. You have to disable those through group policy. So you might think you got rid of one lot, and then you stick it on, and then you come and all the rest of them back on. So you've got to be careful with that. So what I always say is once the apps are removed, you can now connect to the internet. Because previously, if you built your image with the apps connected, or so the app's still on, you connect to the internet, it would then take 10 minutes to update all your apps, connect everything, and that was your biggest problem. So you use group policy to disable your built-in apps like Candy Crush, and I'll give you the commands and the group policy stuff where to go from that afterwards. And then you can also use App Locker if you want. Is there any other apps that you want that you want to block from opening? You install your Windows 10 ISO, install all your software. A couple of little things I would say: change your local security policy. For some bizarre reason, Microsoft decided to disable the local admin even being able to open Edge as a local administrator. You can't open the default browser as a local administrator on Windows 10. Who's decided that? That's just madness. So there's a lot of stuff in the local administrator, in the local profiles, security policies that you have to change to get admin approval. If you don't do that, then you get a lot of problems. And then what you do is you set up your local administrator account as a default user, and then you profile it in audit mode. I'll come on to that in a bit in the Sysprep section. The one thing I always do as well is always ensure .NET 3.5 is enabled. Even though we're on now .NET 4.7, I think it is, make sure 3.5 is enabled, because the majority of programs, Imperial for instance is a good example, it still requires the old .NET 3.5 to be installed. And you can just run that using the DISM command. Set your default backgrounds, login screens, etc. OneDrive, does anybody use OneDrive connected in? Okay, in 1709, OneDrive will actually have single sign-on integration into your home folders. That's the new thing coming into 1709. So just be careful with this one, but we prevent OneDrive from running with a registry entry. I can give you the registry entry, so it doesn't keep coming up and saying, do you want to sign into OneDrive and everything. And then obviously ensure the delightful Windows updates are installed. Okay, Sysprep. We're obviously all used to using Sysprep, not an issue with that. Okay, so create a WDS from Windows 10 ISO. Create your under10 file, your Windows automated installation file. And then I always do it on a 10 file from WDS or in the Sysprep folder. I tend to put it in a Sysprep folder and then Sysprep, so it carries out the actions. But you can do it either way. And the key to this is you must make sure the copy profile command is in the WAIK file, because you need to copy the default profile on that computer. That's going to be your default profile, and the success of your whole project will depend on that. You Sysprep it into audit mode. Yeah, various options how to do that. And then configure your admin account for your default profile. Sysprep and capture, and then you deploy using WDS. Anybody use Active Directory pre-staged these devices? In WDS you can actually pre-stage all your computers, and then you can actually just roll out to a suite and just go out automatically to that suite. And then you can set all your options, auto-join, we have it auto-join domain, auto-activate Office, absolutely everything. Sophos auto-install when it comes out, the whole lot. So really at the end of it, all you should have to do is, once you finish, is just name it or something like that. And then we use PDQ to deploy all our software, Java, Silverlight, Reader, Shockwave, Chrome, and everything. We don't actually install that at the beginning. We never put that on. We use PDQ, which is a piece of software. And what it does, when you put Java on, it disables the auto update. So you don't get those annoying little things that there's a Java update available, there's a Flash update, you don't get any of that. We can give you details about PDQ. Rick's a PDQ specialist.
It's really not.
I was say with things like Flash and Java, what I tend to do instead of the update is edit the property in the MSI. There's like usually you can change a 1 to a 0. And
yes.
Just
yeah. But the good, as I say, PDQ. I'm not sure what the price now, but it's not dear, it's not cheap. But for what it gives you, is that when a Flash update comes out, which is now nearly monthly, you can basically just go to your whole domain, right-click, deploy. and it just updates your whole domain. And then there's no annoying things and all the rest of it. So it is really, really good. So the big thing now is profiles. I use local profiles. Windows 7 default profile, I think, what we're on about 3-4 meg, if that. I'm down to about 5 or 6 meg for a default profile. But once you log in, it'll take your profile to nearly 200 meg. It builds the profile and take up to nearly 200 meg. So you need obviously larger disks if you're going to use default profile local. If you use a mandatory, then that's just standard. Your mandatory profile will be about 3 meg. And obviously then it's not going to save meg. Don't forget to put the tick in the group policy to remove old profiles when you log off. Otherwise it'll just keep those profiles in there.
You're saying group profile, is this from 2008 R2 and above?
Yes. Yeah, I always keep, 2008 R2 is my base of going above you. Yeah, it's a good point that, because if you go below that, 2008 don't bother with your domain level. Mandatory profiles, obviously smaller profiles. Depending on how you build it and what your success is, they are quite small, and it's the login speed, really, and that's the key thing. Obviously a mandatory profile, every time you log in, it's like a brand new login. So it's your option about what size disks you got. My preference is local default profiles. We use a piece of software called Delprof 2, where it just deletes your profiles once every half term or something. So with your mandatory profiles, the smaller profiles, but 1507 and 1511 use what's called a V5. So obviously if you use a mandatory on your server, shared drive, you'll just have a folder called mandatory.v5. And then 1607 and 1703 uses a V6. That's a Microsoft just to change it on the Windows 10. 1709, no one has got any idea yet. We're hoping it's going to stay at V6, but it might go to V7. So you're going to have to create a new mandatory profile again. Roaming profiles, really, all the people I've spoken to at Microsoft now are basically saying, roaming profiles, forget them. Mandatory and local default is the way to go, because the roaming profiles are causing so many issues with the start menu and the app data and all the redirection and everything. So a lot of people still use them. And again, I'll speak to you separately if you want to use roaming profiles, but it is about the redirection of the app data section, which is key to the creation of the roaming profiles.
Which is best if you've got equipment that anybody could potentially be using rather than...
What I do is I use for admin, I create a default profile for staff and a default profile for students. The new profile creation method I use now doesn't really make any difference, because the inside of it is so stripped out, the registry and everything, there's no relationship to anything anymore. So you can just use a default profile on anybody, it doesn't make any difference.
It's not going to take forever initial...
No. Our default profile login now is about 20 to 30 seconds on first login, and then about 5 to 6 seconds on the second login. That's the advantage of a default profile. Second login, the whole suite's going in 20 seconds, and that's the big advantage. And I keep harping on about this, you'll probably be bored of me saying it, but the success of your Windows 10 deployment will definitely depend on getting your profile correct. If you get that right, honestly, it's an absolute dream afterwards. I've got a thing on here, and as I say, there'll be copies of this PowerPoint available. It is a summary. I can actually send you, if you want, if you leave your email addresses, a detailed profile creation method. But I'm just going to very quickly, I've got plenty of time, run through it. So you always create your profile as a local admin in admin mode. So obviously in Windows 7, what we used to do was to go to Properties, right-click Advanced, User Profile, click on Windows Enabler. Have you used Windows Enabler? And then you copy your profile, strip it out a bit, and there's your default profile. You used to be able to do that in the first versions of Windows 10. Now it doesn't work. So they've stopped that. So what my advice is, always create your profile as a local admin in audit mode. And when you sysprep and put the copy profile command back in, when you roll it back out again, you then have your default profile which you can take off. So create an UNI10 file with a copy profile command in, sysprep colon your UNI10 file from your sysprep folder, and then your profile will be copied to the default profile, and that's your base one that you're going to use. Again, advanced settings, user profiles, copy default profile location, put authenticated users permitted to use as the permissions. If you don't, no one can get into anything. and then put a tick in the mandatory profile box, and I'll come on to that in a bit. This is the big one, and this is the piece that everybody seems to miss. To set the file permissions on the profile folder, and this is the one I've only recently found, oh, about 3 or 4 months ago, there's a security group called All Application Packages. And that's the key to the success now of getting everything working. When you put that on as your permissions, you don't have any problems with your start menus. That's the big one. So that's very, very important. So you need all application packages. And when you think about it, in Windows 10 and your start menu, where all your applications, your icons and all the rest of it, they are just apps and packages. So if you give proper permissions to all of that, that cuts down the bits not working. So set your permissions, all application packages, full control, authenticated users, and then read and execute for system. Full control for administrators, and then make sure you cascade those permissions to all the folders, and the owner of the folder should be the administrator. So the next bit is to set the registry permissions. I can see the guy who was saying, why on earth do I have to go from Windows 7 and go through all of this? I quite agree. I wish I hadn't now. But you know, we went from Windows XP to Windows 7, so we've got to go sometime at the end of the day. So hopefully I'm just taking a bit of grief away from what you're going to have to go through. So what we'll do is we have to set registry permissions now, and the .dat file that we have in the profile, that we exported out, we load that in the registry. HKU uses Hive, load Hive and select your .dat file. Remove the restricted group from the permissions, and then put the same permissions as the above. And again, that's the important bit, is the all applications packages, full control on the registry as well. That's the other key thing that's been noticed quite recently. And then search the registry Hive for instances of the username administrator and delete them all. Yeah, and make sure you unload the Hive at the end of your session, because otherwise the Hive will be locked in the .dat file. And then delete the registry transaction logs in the profile folder. So you'll see .dat and you'll see a load of logs in there. Just delete all those, you don't need them. And then this is a bit of a one actually. This is the one I found that stopped all the start menu issues. In the original default profile, under app data, you'll see a load of folders, and one of them is called tile data layer, and it's basically the tile data layer database, which is from the start menu. And we're all linking back here to the start menu. And then you've got a packages folder. And in there you've got something experience and all the rest of it. I just delete the Cortana large package, which is about 35 meg, and just leave all the rest in. And then put the tile data layer folder in the default profile. And we don't seem to have any issues with the start menu at all. So if you do play around with it, just maybe try leaving it out. And then if it doesn't work, just try putting those in. But some of the articles I'll show you, I'll email you, certainly say to leave the tile data layer in, because that's the database of actually what the start menu is when you create it. And then if you're doing a mandatory profile, obviously rename your .dat to .man, and then name the folder with a .v6 at the end. Obviously leave it if you're just using as a local profile. And then on Windows 10, if you right click the start menu, so you get basically what's called 3 groups. You've got control panel and all that, and then at the top of it you've got PowerShell and all the rest of it. So those are actually found in your default profile, app data, local Microsoft Cloud, WinX folder. And there's 3 folders in there. What I do is I just delete the lot. So when they right click, nothing comes up. The big secret to the thing a lot of people say to me, so what means when administrators go on, they can't right click it after either. What I do is when I create my image, I actually log in as an administrator, domain administrator first, and then that carries over, so it doesn't apply to him. Or just copy it back in for the administrator if you want. But that's key because it obviously...
Can you not just disable the WinX menu and group policy?
I've not seen in that where to disable it. A lot of people have tried to do that, and they've tried. Some people are trying to disable the right click, then that disables it for everything. That's the easiest way I've seen it, is just take the whole thing out.
So a group of users who would have full control of their desktop, you just wouldn't put that in that profile?
No.
Yeah, just do the one for the students.
Just do the one for the students, do the one for staff, but administrators, as I say, I always log in as the domain administrator before I finish my Sysprep. So he's got a profile already created, with all this stuff on, and then that doesn't affect, because you're obviously not deleting his profile when you're sysprepping it. But it does cause, even though you've blocked the permissions to control panel, or run, and all the rest of it, you don't want students seeing that menu. Again, it's personal preference. That's our personal preference that we do. And then you come on to the delightful Start Menu desktop folder redirection. So we redirect all the desktop, we redirect the Start Menu, and we redirect the tile that we see for staff and for students. So we have separate things. So the tiles can be set. This can be very, very finicky, and I'll come on to this in a minute. But the Start Menu tiles are controlled with an XML file. So you log in as your local admin, create all your tiles or the tile menu that you want, and there's a PowerShell command that you run which will actually export your tile menu into an XML file, exactly how you want it. Be very careful about what you put on. Sometimes people are saying if you put Internet Explorer on your tiles, if one tile doesn't work, the whole Start Menu doesn't work. So don't be worried if your Start Menu comes up and it's completely blank. That means you've got a problem in your XML file, so just try something else. It doesn't seem to like stuff like Internet Explorer or Edge. Obviously, Microsoft stuff in its own tile menu, it doesn't like for some bizarre reason. But what I recommend to people is just basically you can just put a shortcut in. Once you get your XML file, if you just edit and see what the code is, and then just put a shortcut in there to Internet Explorer or something, and it works with shortcuts, it makes it a lot better. To tell you the truth, we just put the basics of the Microsoft apps, Sims.net, Adobe software, Chrome, bits and pieces like that. Don't need to go too mad on this, and especially in 1703 where you can group icons now into folders, you have to be very careful because you can just go mad. We tend to just put most of the stuff on the desktop. The big difference between 1511, 1607, 1703 is on the Start Menu. On here you'll see, so this is a 1511 Start Menu. So on there you'll see the log off is at the top of the Start Menu. On 1703, the log off has now come down to just above File Explorer. And also by default in the Start Menu 1703, they don't enable File Explorer. So it's important when you set up your default profile that you enable that, because otherwise there isn't any way to get to my computer. I mean, who made that one up? That's just...
What I found in my previous role was I actually put a shortcut to File Explorer in the tile layout.
Yeah, so you can do that, yeah, or I just put two of them on the I actually had to put my computer icon and this PC, because people didn't know what this PC meant. So that's a personal preference. I just try and keep it very simple. I just more like the colours really and tend to put everything really on the desktop. I just make a little log off icon on the desktop as well, because a lot of staff can't basically find the log off icon on the thing, and especially when it keeps changing all the while. God knows where it's going to be when they bring out the fall creators update. You know what I mean? It's madness. So it's important really how you work that one out. There's some good examples on EduGeek. I don't know who uses EduGeek. Sometimes it's a good place, sometimes a bad place. The Start Menu redirection, group policy, just make sure you get your permissions correct on the Start Menu folder. That's very, very important. If you get it correct, then there's not an issue. And again, the same with the desktop folder redirection. That's exactly the same as well. Now, the app data redirection, some people redirect certain parts of the app data from your default profile. Some people don't. I don't personally. I just leave it in the default profile as a local one. There's a group policy setting, if you don't put it on, which is called Remove Common Program Groups from Start Menu. And that will get rid of, the ones all down the bottom here, where it says Windows PowerShell, administrative tools, and all the rest of it. If you put that on, that will remove all of those program groups from your Start Menu.
With a lot of tile options, would you, from your experience, recommend then that you would start from a base of Server 2014 because they're group policies, or would you say it's still okay using? Still use
2008 R2. I'll come on to group policy in a minute.
Yeah.
The best options for group policy, but yeah, certainly R2. It'll work fine with all two, and I'll give you those options in a minute. What to do with the group policy. So use group policy. Remove common program groups from Start Menu, because otherwise they'll see, even though they can't access it. I'm a great believer. If they can't see it, they don't know what they're doing. They won't do it. So. So on the group policy, what I recommend is always get the latest group policy definitions from Windows 10. Either from the latest ISO that you download from EES or from the Microsoft website itself. And I've tended to go now to the Microsoft website to get the latest policy definitions. And basically, there's a lot of so much new stuff in it now that you need to put the 1703 Windows 10 policy definitions, both of them, the ADMs and the ADMXs, into the folders. Once you get into there, your big key thing now is getting everything so your first sign-in experience is basic. Yeah. If you just left it to Microsoft, honestly, you'd be watching Netflix all day before you signed in, because it's an absolute nightmare. So a couple of little things. Turn off Microsoft Consumer Experience. That then removes all the apps like Candy Crush, Twitter feed, and all the rest of it. That stops all of those coming up. Disable first sign-in animation policies. Okay, that'll decrease your login speed, so you don't have this welcome to Windows, la la la, and all the rest of it. Yeah, so that's quite important. There's lots of policies, stop access to the C drive settings and all the rest of it. A quick summary, so I always remove, to make sure you get a quick login, remove the common program groups, start layout, do not display getting started welcome screen, disable first sign-in animation, and turn off Microsoft Consumer Experiences. And that basically gets rid of welcome to Windows, you're my friend, here's some apps and all the rest of it. It just basically takes you straight in quite quickly. Common issues. Start menu not working. Hopefully, following this procedure for you building your image and your default profile, you won't have those issues. But common issues are start menu. You come up, click on start menu, there's nothing. First time you log in, you click on start menu, there's nothing. The second time you log in, it works. Third time you log in, apps start disappearing. All starts getting misshapen. And it's all down to permissions. So it's quite key that you got that. We were quite plagued really by a black screen on login. So we'd log in and we'd just sit on the black screen. And we're not sure, we thought at 95% we think it was Imperial. Imperial came out with a lot of updates, got rid of 99.9% of them, but we do get the occasional one. So, and really all you got to do is just restart the machine. You can't log off, you have to restart the machine. Login speeds. If you follow this guide, I would probably say you're going to be quite successful. But login speeds is the big one. On older machinery, really, I mean, if you've got a DDR2 RAM or those sort of computers, it's going to work. I mean, I stick them in the really old areas that people may be using once or twice a week. It does work. If you're going to use it, just remember staff who's already logged in once, then it's absolutely fine. I try and say minimum of 8 gig RAM. RAM's so cheap these days anyway, isn't it? So, and either SSD or SHSD drives. And Windows updates. They're now cumulative updates. Okay, so they come out, well, Windows 10 now is coming out twice a month at the moment. The problem is they can be very large. So the cumulative update will come down and the update will be about 1 gig. And then it'll go onto the computer and say, what updates do I need? Oh, I actually only need 10 meg. But the fact is it actually downloads. So if your laptops are on, you'll kill your laptop login speed straight away. So it's quite important how you manage your WAS server. PDQ, our favorite thing, PDQ. If you use the enterprise version, it actually has the cumulative updates built in, and you can just right click and deploy to where you want, which is quite a handy thing. One of the things as well we found is when you build your image, your WDS image, they really have to do it in Windows 7, but in Windows 10 now, is if it doesn't reset the SUS ID in the registry. So every now and again you go in, you do your Windows updates, they do the updates, it finds the updates, but it doesn't show in your WAS server. So you think, oh my God, where's all my computers gone? You need to reset the WAS registry entry for the SUS ID and then reauthorize for the WAS server, and then it'll all appear fine. I can see you all look horrified at the moment, thinking, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying on Windows 7, which I can't blame you one bit, honestly. But unfortunately, again, when we were on Windows XP, we all said, why do we have to go to Windows 7? We have to go at some time, later probably than soon. I normally say it sooner or later, but I'm hoping really the presentation is my experience over the last 2.5 years of tips, tricks, little things, and basically, you know, our latest image now is 1703. We just whack out, everything seems to work, our RDS farm seems to work, so, and it's just for those latest registering, building your default profile issues that I think you can get around of. So I'm hoping that was helpful for you, for your deployment when it does come up. Please call Rick, not me. I mean, no, if you do need any information, we'll make it available on the ANME site. And my details will be on the site anyway, so if you need to email me, I can email you the articles, the links to everything, because they are very good. Okay, nothing. Any questions?
We've just done this summer, the whole school. When we first did Windows 10, any policy that wasn't in the main route would never be applied. So if you got a policy further down, it would not apply.
Did you carry your Windows 7 policies over or create new ones?
There were new ones for Windows.
With brand spanking new ones? Yeah, that's the other thing I said. Never copy or clone a Windows 7 group policy, because they have the old settings in there that sometimes your ADMX files aren't in there anymore. Did you copy the latest definitions?
Everything.
And what's your server infrastructure?
2008 R2, we got 2012 servers.
And your domain levels at?
2012.
Your domain levels at 2012 with an R2 domain controller?
No, they're not controls now.
Oh, sorry, right, okay.
They're 12 controllers.
Right.
And we found out what the problem, well, it was sheer accident, and it was through everything on Educate. I put a loopback thing in default domain policy, and they all applied.
Oh, on the, where'd you put your loop back? In the?
Default domain policy.
Yeah.
Everything just applied.
Yeah. I have actually heard that when if sometimes if people migrated, did you migrate your DCs or did you upgrade?
New ones.
They're brand new ones as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of people migrate from 2002 up to say 2012 or 16. Sometimes you do need a loop back in your group policy. Yeah. But those are handy little tips, and that's why I like the session to be interactive, because you know everybody learns something. So
about 6 months to work it out.
yeah, don't say that. It'll never go.
Because we tried it, we tried different
Yeah.
machines and everything. This was going back to 2 years ago.
And
Not really applied.
yeah. So do you have any current issues?
Not really.
Yeah.
It went quite smooth. We found a few things that the staff didn't want. Well, the kids, and the staff couldn't do. We found the issue where they couldn't find a log off, couldn't find locks,
Yeah.
to be trained.
The other thing as well is the thing you might be handy to know is Cortana. Do you allow Cortana or?
I've turned it off.
Yeah.
On the kids.
So the new version,
I've left it on.
1703, it's back.
Yeah.
It's like this ghost keeps coming, going, but now Cortana's back, which is great. I mean, our kids love it, but you got to be careful when somebody accidentally puts backslash in, because it'll start searching network. So you got to be careful. So, but you can't just disable it with group policy.
How can you control update notifications if you go with Windows 7? 'Cause remember on Windows 7 before 10 came out, even on the pupils' laptops, no matter what entries we put into here, there and everywhere, Windows kept overwriting them and saying update to Windows 10, update this, update that, which you don't want the students doing in the middle of a session clicking an update button. So
That doesn't come up it doesn't come up in Windows 10. Ours is, we disable the notifications. There's new group policies.
No matter how many different places have disabled Windows 7, it would still, Microsoft found a way of, you'd then have to go in and run all these special third-party softwares, turn it all off. The month later, it's coming back up again.
Is that the Windows 10 update itself?
Yeah.
Once a roll
Trying to do it,
Windows 10 update. Yes.
Oh no, there's a group policy for that now where you can defer.
There wasn't in the 2012 previously.
No, but there's.
Well, you had to dig it at the registry, didn't you? So it didn't have
Yeah.
Then it would
It still pop up somehow.
What? But are you running through your WAS server for updates?
Don't believe, no.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah. So to me, you need to be running through a WAS server. Yeah.
There is one thing we have got a problem with, just like the Windows 10, is the language bar. We can't get it to appear, even though there's multiple keyboards installed. It will not appear on the bottom.
And what did you do with your basic image when you created it?
It's a group of machines from languages, and the keyboards and everything were installed. And before the image was deployed out, the administrator had got it. And when we tried it, it was going. And then we deployed it out, and there's the language bar.
Okay, I might have a look for that for you.
Even the Windows and spacebar.
Yeah.
Appear.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
I just thought that one.
Yeah. All right, I'll speak to you separately on that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you very much for attending.
Simon,
Much appreciated.
Thank you, Simon. We've got a stand in the main exhibition room, so feel free to pop over and see us and join the ANME. It's free. We do terminal meetings in Birmingham, which are also free to attend. And we'll put lunch on and breakfast farms and things. Yeah, and we've got some freebies on the stand as well. We've got a portal online, and we've got a Windows 10 thing going on in there, and Simon's on there. So yeah, feel free to join, discuss, and get involved. So thank you.
Come and join my Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, later. Sessions 5.